They say love is blind. But betrayal? Betrayal has 20/20 vision. I was the fool. The wife who trusted too much. The woman who built her world on a lie. My husband didn't just cheat on me. He didn't just leave me. He shattered my entire family, trading me in for my own flesh and blood. For 2 years, I was a ghost of myself, a walking wound. They thought I was broken. They thought they'd won. They had a beautiful wedding, a perfect life, while I was left with the ashes of mine. But I learned a crucial lesson in those cold, dark years. Revenge isn't a screaming match or a slap in the face. It's not a heated confrontation. No, true revenge is a patient, calculated art. It's the quiet understanding that the seeds of their own destruction were planted the moment they betrayed me. And all I had to do was wait for the harvest. This is the story of how I let them think they had it all, while I meticulously took it all away. My husband slept with my cousin and divorced me to marry her. But revenge is best served cold. The first crack in my universe was a text message. Not on my phone, on his. It was a lazy Sunday, and Donald's phone buzzed on the coffee table, lighting up with a preview from Jane's Sweetheart. The message was innocent enough. Can't wait for Friday. Chapter XOXO. Jane was my cousin, my little cousin. She'd been a fixture in our lives since she was a gawky teenager. I'd helped her with homework, consoled her through breakups, given her a job at the interior design firm I'd painstakingly built from the ground up. She was like a sister. I remember a cold knot tightening in my stomach. A primal instinct I foolishly ignored. Don't be ridiculous, Elaine, I told myself. She's family. He's your husband of 10 years. But the seed was planted. And seeds of doubt, when watered with small, inexplicable changes, grow into monstrous truths. Donald started working late more often. He became overly critical of me. My cooking, my laugh, the way I didn't understand. His ambition. Jane, meanwhile, became a constant, glowing presence. She'd pop over with wine, gushing about how amazing Donald was for taking her under his wing at the finance firm where he was a partner. He's just so brilliant, Elaine. You're so lucky. The irony was a poison I drank daily. The dam broke on our 10th anniversary. I'd planned a surprise weekend at the same secluded cabin where we'd spent our honeymoon. I was giddy, remembering the couple we used to be. The late-night talks, the shared dreams, the way he'd look at me as if I'd hung the moon. When I told him, his face didn't light up. It shut down. Elaine, he said, his voice cold and flat. We need to talk. And there, in our sun-drenched kitchen, the place where we'd shared 1,000 morning coffees, he dismantled our life. He said he'd fallen out of love. He said we'd grown apart. He used all the cliches of a man who'd already rehearsed his lines. I was hysterical. Is there someone else? His silence was louder than any confession. It was Jane who confirmed it. Not out of guilt, but out of a twisted sense of triumph. She came to see me the next day, her eyes hard, her posture defiant. Donald and I are in love, Elaine. It's a connection you could never understand. It's cosmic. The words felt like physical blows. My husband, my cousin, the two people I had loved most, a united front against me. The divorce was brutal and swift. Donald was a powerful man with powerful lawyers. They painted me as emotionally fragile, too invested in my little hobby of a business, a wife who hadn't kept up with her high-achieving husband. I was entitled to half, but Donald's finances were a labyrinth of holding companies and investments. In the end, I got the house, which was filled with ghosts, and a settlement that felt like a pittance compared to what he was worth. Jane, of course, got my husband. They were married 6 months after the divorce was finalized. A lavish, Instagram-perfect wedding. I saw the pictures. Jane, radiant in a dress that looked eerily similar to the one I'd sketched in my journal years ago. Donald, beaming with a vitality I hadn't seen in years. I was a ghost at their feast. A bitter footnote in their perfect love story. For 2 years, I was lost. The house was a mausoleum. My business, Elaine Drake Design, suffered. How could I sell beauty and harmony when my own soul was a war zone? I was a shell, going through the motions. I'd see their curated life online, their trips to Bali, the new Mercedes G-Wagon, their joint philanthropic ventures. They were the city's golden couple, while I was the pathetic ex-wife, the one who couldn't keep her man. The anger was a fire that kept me warm at night, but it was also burning me alive. I wanted to scream, to expose them, to key his car, to send a screenshot of their first, sordid texts to their entire mailing list. But that was the heat of emotion. And heat fades, leaving you with nothing but scorched earth and a mess. The turning point came on a rainy Tuesday. I was sorting through the last of the boxes in the attic, and I found my old leather-bound journal from business school. Flipping through it, I found a quote I'd underlined. "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." Marcus Aurelius. And in that moment, the fog lifted. My rage didn't disappear. It transmuted. It cooled from a roaring inferno into a block of solid, impenetrable ice. Hot anger makes you reckless. Cold rage makes you strategic. They hadn't just hurt me. They had fundamentally underestimated me. They saw the loving wife, the generous cousin, and mistook that kindness for weakness. They forgot that before I was a wife, I was a builder. I built a business from nothing, and I could build something else, a prison of their own making. Revenge wouldn't be an event. It would be a process, a masterpiece. My plan had 3 phases, and it required the one thing they had stripped me of: patience. Phase 1. I had to disappear from their radar as a threat. I became the picture of serene recovery. I sold the house, the last tether to that life, and used the money to quietly reinvest in my business. I took courses, rebranded, and focused on high-end, exclusive clients. I became successful again, but quietly, under the radar. I let mutual friends report back that Elaine is doing so well. She's really moved on. I even sent them a tasteful, impersonal wedding gift, a donation in their name to a charity I knew Donald disliked. It was the ultimate signal that I was no longer a player in their game. I was a spectator. They bought it completely. Phase 2. This was the most intricate part. I needed to understand their world intimately. Donald's business was his identity. Through a discreet and very expensive private investigator, I began to learn things. I learned that Donald's brilliant financial strategies were often borderline unethical, skating on the edge of legality. He was arrogant, and arrogance makes you sloppy. He had a pattern of making risky, leveraged investments for his clients, taking huge personal bonuses when they paid off, but leaving them exposed when they didn't. Jane, now a kept woman, had become a socialite. Her life was a performance of wealth and taste, funded by Donald's bank account. But she had a secret, a gambling problem she'd kept hidden since college. The investigator found regular, large cash withdrawals and discreet trips to a casino in a neighboring state. This was the first thread, a thread I could pull. Phase 3. I needed a way in, an opportunity to re-enter their lives not as a victim, but as an asset. Fate, or perhaps just the inevitable consequence of their own shallow lives, provided it. My firm was hired to redesign the flagship office of a prestigious legal firm. The senior partner, Robert, was a formidable, sharp-minded man in his 60s. During our initial meetings, I learned he was unhappy with his current wealth management firm. He felt they were too aggressive, too opaque. The firm's name? Donald's firm. I didn't push. I simply listened. And when the time was right, over a meeting about fabric swatches, I said, gently, "Robert, can I speak off the record?" As someone who has personal experience, the principal at that firm, Donald, was my ex-husband. I'm not a financial expert, but I know his character. And if you have any unease about transparency, listen to your gut. It was a perfectly placed seed of doubt, delivered with concern, not malice. Robert, a man who valued character above all, was deeply intrigued. My credibility, as his trusted designer, gave my words weight. The plan was in motion. Now, it was about applying pressure at the exact right points. I started with Jane. Using an encrypted messaging app, I sent her an anonymous tip about a high-roller, invite-only poker game, the kind of exclusive, secretive event that would be catnip to her. The investigator ensured she received the invitation. She took the bait. Her gambling, which had been manageable, escalated. The losses mounted. She started dipping into her personal accounts, then into the joint account she shared with Donald. Donald, obsessed with control and image, was furious. Their perfect life began to show hairline fractures, arguments about money, secret credit cards. The social media posts became strained, less frequent. Meanwhile, Robert had begun his own quiet audit of Donald's handling of his portfolio. He asked pointed questions, demanded more documentation. Donald, arrogant as ever, was dismissive, seeing it as an old man's paranoia. This was a catastrophic mistake. Robert was not just a client. He was connected. He was on the board of the city's most exclusive club, the Chamber of Commerce, and he was friends with financial regulators. The final piece came from my investigator. He uncovered a specific transaction. Donald had funneled a large sum of a client's money. A client who was notoriously hands-off into a highly speculative tech startup. The startup was a dud. To cover the loss before the quarterly review, Donald had used a complex series of transfers from other client accounts. It was a Ponzi scheme in miniature. Illegal. Career-ending. Potentially jail time worthy. I had the weapon. Now, I needed to place it in the right hands. I didn't send it to the authorities. Not yet. That would be too direct, too traceable back to me. Instead, I compiled a neatly organized, anonymous dossier. I didn't send it to Robert. I sent it to the hands-off client whose money had been stolen. A reclusive, notoriously litigious billionaire. The reaction was swift and nuclear. A week later, Donald's world exploded. The billionaire's lawyers descended on his firm like avenging angels. The story broke in the financial press. Prominent financial advisor, under investigation for fraud. Robert, upon hearing the news, immediately and publicly pulled his immense portfolio, triggering a cascade of other clients fleeing. The firm's stock plummeted. I watched it unfold from the calm, beautiful sanctuary of my new apartment. I felt no joy, only a quiet, cold satisfaction. Donald was finished. He was fired, his assets frozen, facing a mountain of lawsuits and an almost certain criminal indictment. And Jane? The loss of the money fire hose was her undoing. With Donald's accounts seized, her secret debts came due. The loan sharks she'd been dealing with weren't as understanding as her ex-husband. They started making calls. Threatening calls. The perfect, curated life she'd stolen from me was revealed as a gilded cage, and the bars were now closing in. They say you should never show your hand. But some messages need to be delivered personally. The venue was the annual Children's Hospital Gala, the city's most prestigious charity event. It was where status was affirmed. I bought a single ticket. I wore a simple, devastatingly elegant black gown. I looked better than I had in a decade, strong, poised, successful. I saw them across the room. They were a stark contrast to their former glory. Donald looked shrunken, his suit hanging loosely on him, his eyes darting nervously. Jane was clinging to his arm, her smile strained, her dress from last season. They were pariahs. People actively turned their backs as they passed. I waited. I mingled. I laughed genuinely with Robert, who now considered me a trusted confidant for my unfortunate but prescient insight. Finally, as I was getting a glass of champagne, they had no choice but to cross my path. There was no escape. The room seemed to quiet. All eyes were on us. "Elaine," Donald stammered, his face pale. "You look well." "Thank you, Donald," I said, my voice calm, melodic. "I am. Very." Jane stared at me, her eyes a mixture of hatred and desperation. "I suppose you're happy," she hissed, low enough so only I could hear. "You did this. I know you did."